In the heart of the bustling African metropolis, where towers of glass rose above rusty rooftops, lived a woman named Adana. Every morning before sunrise, she would pull on her faded cleaner's uniform, tie her headscarf tight, and walk the cracked sidewalks to her job at Zenith Tower, a building that stood like a polished blade in the sky. Her days were filled with silence. She mopped marble floors, cleaned bathrooms that sparkled brighter than any surface in her modest one-room shack, and emptied trash bins for people who never saw her. The elite walked past her without a glance, but Adana never complained. She believed in dignity, in hard work, in patience, and in doing right even when no one noticed. Each evening, when the streets emptied and the businessmen disappeared into luxury cars, Adana would take the long way home through a quiet path, behind a row of markets. And that's where she saw him for the first time. He sat under a broken billboard, scruffy, unshaven, and wrapped in an old coat that barely held back the chill. His eyes, though weary, had depth. He never begged. He never even spoke. He just sat with a gentle calmness that didn't match his surroundings. Adana walked past him for weeks. But every time, she noticed he never asked for help, but he never looked away either. One evening, when her shift ended late and the rains had fallen hard, she saw him drenched and shivering. Without a word, she took out her only bread roll from her bag and handed it to him. He looked up, eyes glinting with something unreadable, and whispered, "Thank you." From that night on, she brought him leftovers, rice in wrapped paper, a bottle of clean water, a blanket she saved up from her second-hand earnings. She never asked his name. He never asked hers. It was a quiet friendship, an unspoken bond between two souls who understood pain without needing to speak of it. What Adana didn't know was that the man she thought had nothing once had everything. The rains came early that year. Cold winds swept through the city like ghostly messengers, rattling tin roofs and chasing vendors off the streets. But Adana still walked that same path every night. And every night, the man under the billboard waited. Some days he smiled when she approached. Other days he simply nodded, his thoughts lost somewhere far away. She never pried. She never questioned. She only offered what she had: food, warmth, company. And he, in return, gave her something she never expected: peace. There was something about him that made her feel seen, truly seen. His eyes held a history, yet he listened to her simple stories like they were poetry. Her tales of rude tenants, of the lady in the 14th floor office who never smiled, or of the elevator that made strange noises. He would laugh softly, the sound rare but comforting. One evening, as she handed him a hot meat pie she saved from lunch, he finally spoke more than a thank you. "You're kind," he said. "Too kind for this city." Adana chuckled. "Kindness doesn't cost anything. That's why people think it's worthless," he replied, his voice rough, as if unused to conversation. She sat beside him under the buzzing flicker of the broken streetlight. "Who were you before this?" He looked at her slowly, thoughtfully. "Someone I'm not proud of." She paused. "But people change, do they?" he asked. Adana nodded. "Only when they're given a reason to." That night, something shifted between them. Their silences became more comfortable. Their smiles lasted a little longer. Adana began looking forward to the end of her day, not just to rest her feet, but to share a quiet moment with a man the world had forgotten. But others started to notice. The street vendors began whispering. One of her coworkers from Zenith Tower saw her walking with him and warned her. "People are talking, Adana," she said. "They say you're spending time with a madman, a man with no home, no money. You need to be careful. You have a reputation." Adana only smiled. "He's not mad. He's just quiet." Her coworker scoffed and broke. Adana looked down. "So am I." But the truth was, she didn't care what they thought. To her, kindness wasn't a transaction. She wasn't looking for gain. She only knew that every time she saw him, her burdens felt a little lighter. Still, the whispers grew louder. She heard it in the hallway of the building she cleaned. Heard the security guards joke about the cleaner and her new street boyfriend. One even laughed. "Maybe he'll pay your rent in street coins." But Adana walked on with her head high. What she didn't see were the eyes watching her. From a tinted car, parked across the street. From behind a camera lens mounted on a far-off building. From the shadows of the very tower she scrubbed clean each night. Because this story was never just about a cleaner and a homeless man. Something much bigger was unfolding. And Adana was walking right into it with a heart open and a truth still hidden. Asterisk, asterisk, the next few weeks passed in a quiet rhythm, like a soft lullaby hummed. In the midst of chaos, each evening, after her long shifts at Zenith Tower, Adana would take her usual detour behind the marketplace. And each time, the man was there, waiting, patient, grateful. His name, she finally learned one cool evening, was Ikenna. "Ikenna," she repeated, letting the name rest on her tongue. "It suits you." He smiled. "And you? What do they call you?" "Adana," she said. "My father named me that. It means father's daughter. He passed when I was young. My mother raised me alone. She used to say, 'Even if we have nothing, we must never lose our kindness.'" Ikenna nodded. "She raised you well." But while their bond grew, the cracks in Ikenna's past began to show. One night, Adana brought him a radio someone had thrown out. She'd cleaned and fixed it. As static gave way to music, Ikenna froze when a familiar voice came through. An announcer from a high-profile business station. "That voice," he whispered. "It used to mention my name every day." Adana tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Atika only stood up, paced a few steps, then sat again. "Let me tell you a story," he said, voice distant. "There was once a boy who built empires with his bare hands. From selling scrap metal to owning factories. But the higher he climbed, the lonelier he became. One day, those he trusted most turned on him. They stole from him, lied to him. And when he tried to fight back, they left him for dead." Adana listened, breath held. "The boy survived," Ikenna continued, "but he lost faith in wealth, in power, in people. He gave up his name. He gave up everything." She looked at him gently. "You're not talking about a boy, Ikenna." "No," he whispered. "I'm talking about a ghost. Me." The truth hung in the air like thick fog. Adana tried to laugh it off. "Are you saying you were rich?" Ikenna chuckled darkly. "Rich? I was beyond rich. I was the CEO of Havilah Group, the same company that owns Zenith Tower." Adana's eyes widened. She cleaned that tower daily. That name was on every document, every elevator panel, every door plate of the executive floor. But it couldn't be. "You're joking." "I wish I were." He pulled something from his coat pocket, a torn photo, creased, weathered. In it, a much younger Ikenna stood proudly in a suit, shaking hands with dignitaries in front of a banner that read, "Havilah Group, building Africa's future." Adana stared. "Why would you leave all that?" "I didn't leave," he said, voice tight. "I was forced out, betrayed by my own board. My best friend took my company. My fiancé leaked fake documents to discredit me. The media turned me into a villain overnight." Adana sat still, unsure what to believe. Could this kind-eyed, quiet man really be the billionaire she read about once in old news articles? The one who disappeared after a scandal that rocked the nation? "I don't want pity," Ikena added softly. "I found more peace under this billboard than I ever did in a boardroom." She reached out, touched his hand gently. "I don't pity you. I respect you for surviving, for still being kind." For the first time, she saw his eyes fill with tears. But what neither of them noticed was that across the street, inside a tinted black SUV, a man in sunglasses was speaking into a phone. "He's been found," the voice said. "Mr. Ikena is alive." The next morning began like any other for Adana, early, cold, and quiet. She stepped into Zenith Tower with her cleaning cart, her mind still swirling with Ikena's confession from the night before. Had she really been sitting beside a man whose face once graced business magazines? Could the man eating leftover rice from a paper wrap truly be the founder of the company that now paid her minimum wage? She couldn't shake the image of the photograph he'd shown her. It was real. She knew it. But even more real was the softness in his voice, the pain he carried, the truth behind his eyes. She scrubbed the lobby floors slowly, her eyes drifting to the massive gold plaque behind the reception desk. Havilah Group Headquarters, cold, polished, and heartless. She wanted to ask someone to verify his story, but something told her not to. Something deeper whispered, "Trust him, not them." Upstairs, in a glass-walled executive suite on the 30th floor, a man named Desmond Obika stared out over the city. Desmond was tall, polished, and sharp as a blade. He had once been Ikena's closest friend. Now he was the acting CEO of Havilah. He'd received a photo that morning. A photo of Ikena alive and well, though ragged, sitting under a billboard with a woman who wore a cleaner's uniform. Desmond's hand tightened around the image. "Of all the places to hide," he muttered. He crawled back to the very feet of his empire. His assistant stood nervously nearby. "What should we do, sir?" Desmond turned slowly. "Nothing. Yet, let him roam. Let him remember what he lost. Then we'll remind him who took it." Back on the ground floor, Adana clocked out early and hurried back to the billboard alley. But Ikena wasn't there. She waited and waited. The street vendors passed her curious glances. One old woman selling mangoes called out, "He left in a black car. This morning, men in suits took him." Adana's heart dropped. Was he in danger? Had they found him? Had his enemies? She sprinted to the nearest newspaper stall, hands trembling. She skimmed the headlines. The photos. Nothing but in the bottom corner of one tabloid was a small story. Rumors rise of fallen CEOs return insiders. Claim Ikena Obika may still be alive. Her legs gave out. She sank onto the sidewalk, breath caught in her chest. He was gone. And no one knew where. She thought of the nights they'd talked about hope, about trust, about healing. Had he been taken back to face the same people who broke him? But what she didn't know was that Ikena had left a note under a folded blanket. Inside a Ziploc bag, her name scrawled across it. She didn't find it that day, not yet, because something much greater was unfolding. A reckoning long overdue. Asterisk, asterisk, it wasn't until the next evening, when the wind carried a sharper chill than usual, that Adana returned to the alley, again hoping, praying, searching. But the billboard corner was empty. The scent of smoke no longer lingered, and the folded blanket she'd donated now lay undisturbed. Disheartened, she knelt, brushing a hand across the fabric, and then she felt it. A lump beneath, she reached in and pulled out a small, transparent bag, sealed tight. Inside, a folded piece of brown paper. Her name was written on it, Adana. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone. Not because I wanted to leave you, but because I no longer have the choice to remain hidden. They found me. Or maybe I allowed myself to be found. I wasn't running anymore, not from the world, and not from myself. You reminded me of who I once was." of the man who believed that humanity still had a place in boardrooms and power. Your kindness broke through walls I thought were impenetrable. I owe you more than words can ever repay. If I never return, remember this: everything I said was true. Every story, every smile, every moment. You saw me when no one else did. Thank you, Ikenna. Tears slipped down Adana's cheeks as she pressed the letter to her chest. Her heart ached not with betrayal, but with a sense of profound loss. A chapter had closed, abruptly. And yet something within her whispered, this story isn't over. With trembling resolve, she stood up and wiped her face. She wasn't going to sit and mourn. If Ikenna was in trouble, the people who betrayed him had dragged him back into the fire, then she would not stay silent. Adana had no money, no power, no degree. But what she did have was something priceless: the truth, and she was about to step into a world that didn't even know she existed. A world with golden elevators and shark-filled boardrooms. A world that once belonged to Ikenna just might belong to him again. If she had anything to say about it, Adana had never been inside Zenith's tower as anything more than a shadow. A silent figure who polished floors and emptied bins while the powerful passed her by. But today, she wasn't here to mop Dot. She was here to find Ikenna. With his letter tucked in her handbag and courage trembling in her chest, she entered the gleaming lobby not in her cleaner's uniform, but in her best dress, a faded blue gown her mother had sewn years ago, now ironed to crisp perfection. She walked past the security guards who barely glanced her way. But as she approached the front desk, one of them looked up, recognizing her. "You're the cleaner, right?" he asked, frowning. "I need to speak to someone in the executive office," she said, steadying her voice. The man chuckled. "You think you can walk in there?" "I need to speak to Mr. Desmond Obika," she said. "It's about Ikenna." The name cracked the air like thunder. The guard's smirk faded. 10 minutes later, she was escorted to the 30th floor of the Lion's Den. The executive suite was nothing like the places she cleaned. Polished marble floors, walls adorned with oil paintings. An air that smelled of money and control. Desmond stood behind a wide glass desk, staring out over the city. He turned as she entered, his eyes cold, calculating. "You're the woman from the photographs," he said, voice smooth as silk laced with venom. "I'm here to find Ikenna," she said. "And who are you to him?" Adana met his gaze. "I'm the one who helped him when you left him for dead." Desmond's face twitched ever so slightly. He walked toward her slowly. "You think you know who he is? You think he's some victim? That man built this empire and nearly burned it down with his pride." "He trusted you," she said, her voice rising. "And you took everything." Desmond smiled. He gave it away the moment he stopped seeing clearly. He became soft, weak, like he is now. Adana stepped forward, her hands trembling. "He's not weak. He's more of a man in rags than you are in that suit." A long silence fell. Then Desmond leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "Let me give you advice, little cleaner. Stay in your lane. Walk away. Because if you try to get in the way of this, you'll be swept aside like the dirt you used to scrub." But Adana didn't flinch. She pulled the letter from her bag and placed it on his desk. "Ikenna may have walked away from this empire, but I'll make sure he walks back in, only to show you that real strength doesn't wear gold, gives it up for something greater." And with that, she turned and walked out each step, echoing louder than the next dot in the elevator. Her heart pounded. But she had done it. The war had begun, and she wouldn't stop until Ikenna was free, not just from the lies that buried him, but from the belief that he didn't deserve to rise again. Days passed with no word from Ikenna. Adana returned to her cleaning job each morning, but her heart was no longer in it. Every polished surface, every golden elevator, every nameplate engraved with the title reminded her of the man who should. have been standing in one of those offices, not lying forgotten beneath a billboard. She began asking questions, quietly whispers exchanged with the security guards, janitors, and cafeteria staff. These were the people the world overlooked, just like her. And like her, they had seen things. Heard things one night while collecting trash outside the IT department. A young technician slipped her a note. He's being held, not in chains, but in silence. Floor 34, no access without code. Eyes everywhere. Be careful. Floor 34. That floor didn't exist, not on the directory. Zenith Tower officially had 33 floors. But Adana had long known, in places of power, what's hidden is often where the truth lives. She clutched the note and slipped it into her sock. That night, she didn't take the usual route home. Instead, she waited outside the building until the sky turned purple and the last executives left. Then, she slipped back inside through the service door using the master cleaner's pass, something they never thought twice about. In the janitor's closet, she changed into a cleaner's coat, grabbed her cart, and rolled it toward the freight elevator. She pressed the button and held her breath. The panel lit up. The usual numbers glowed, 1 through 33. But tucked between 32 and 33 was a faint, flickering 34. She hesitated, then pressed it. The elevator hummed softly. Her hands gripped the cart's handle tighter. As the doors opened, cold air hit her face like a slap. The floor was dim, sterile. White walls, silver doors with no handles. Cameras in every corner. She moved cautiously, peeking around the corners. Then she saw it, through a narrow glass panel in one door. There he was, Akenna, sitting on a cushioned bench. Clean-shaven, dressed in a gray sweater. And pants, alive, but distant. Hollow, she gasped. Her heart raced. A sharp voice rang out behind her. You shouldn't be here. She turned and came face to face with Desmond. Adana froze. The corridor was silent, save for the soft hum of the lights overhead and the thump of her heartbeat in her ears. Desmond stepped closer, his hands folded calmly behind his back. Curiosity is dangerous, Miss Adana, especially in towers built on secrets. How can you keep him here like this? She asked, voice trembling. He's not your prisoner. Desmond chuckled softly. Prisoner? No. He's free to leave, but Akenna, he doesn't want to. He's broken, weak, unfit for the throne he once sat on. He's not broken, she snapped. You're afraid of him, afraid people. We'll see who the real visionary is. You want the world to forget him. Desmond's smile dropped. You're smarter than you look, he said, which is why I'll offer you a deal. He pulled out a slim envelope and held it between two fingers. This is 500,000 naira, cash, clean, enough to leave this job. Start a new life, far away from him. Walk away now. Okay. And no one will hear from either of us again. Adana stared at the envelope, then at the glass door behind which Akenna sat. You think I care about money? She said. I gave him bread. When I couldn't feed myself, I shared warmth when I had no blanket. Do you think your dirty money tempts me now? She slapped the envelope to the floor. Desmond narrowed his eyes. You don't understand what you're stepping into. I understand this, she said. He was a king who was betrayed, and kings rise. Before he could respond, she turned and stormed back into the elevator. But she didn't go down. She went up to the very top, to the old boardroom of Havilah Group. The room was dusty, untouched, locked in time. Framed photographs of Akenna hung crooked on the wall. She stared at a picture of him at a groundbreaking ceremony, hand raised, eyes full of vision, and in that moment she made a vow. I will bring you back, she whispered, even if I have to fight the entire tower. Adana knew she couldn't do this alone. She had no legal team, No media influence and no access to the corridors where real power whispered. But what she did have was a network of unseen voices. Janitors, the kitchen staff, the security guards, the messengers. People like her. People who'd also been overlooked and mistreated by the tower's cold machinery. She started speaking to them. Not all at once, quietly, carefully. Whispers passed. From hallway to hallway, break room to boiler room. Stories about Ikenna, how he once treated his workers with fairness. How he used to visit the kitchen staff personally to ask about their families. How the day he disappeared, the soul of the company vanished with him. They remembered him not, the media's villain, but the man behind the vision. And slowly, support began to grow. It began with a message on a wall in the underground break room. Ikenna lives. Then came the posters printed quietly at the back of the maintenance office and slipped into lockers and supply closets. A photo of Ikenna before the fall, with the words, "The true founder. The true leader. Bring him back." Desmond's office began receiving anonymous notes. HR started seeing a spike in staff complaints. Meetings grew tenser. Even executives started questioning subtly why Desmond hadn't addressed the rising rumors and in the shadows of Zenith Tower. Adana led it all. She never stepped into the spotlight. She didn't need to. She was the whisper behind the rebellion. The ember that set dry leaves ablaze. Meanwhile, in his guarded isolation, Ikenna began to hear things too. A smuggled note hidden inside a food tray. A knock on the wall in a rhythm only he would recognize. A book placed on his bed with a single line highlighted, "Even kings in exile can rise again." Hope flickered in his chest. For the first time in years, he stood up straighter, looked out the window of his hidden suite, and smiled. Because the tower that once buried him was beginning to shake. And it all started with a cleaner, who refused to be silent. Asterisk, asterisk, the storm came not of wind or rain, but of whispers turning into roars. Within a week, Zenith Tower no longer operated in silence. Workers began to question executive decisions out loud. Anonymous emails flooded Desmond's inbox. Flyers appeared taped to elevators and stairwells with the words, "Where is Ikenna? We want the founder back. Justice for the true visionary." Desmond grew paranoid. Cameras were checked hourly. Guards were doubled. Staff were interrogated. But the rebellion spread like wildfire, feeding off frustration, memory, and hope. And at its center was Adana. She met in broom closets and underground parking lots. She coordinated with the IT guy who disabled camera feeds for a few minutes. At a time, she spoke to former board members who had quietly retired, now ashamed of what Desmond had done. Meanwhile, Ikenna watched from his glass prison. Every time he received a message taped to his food tray or folded inside books, his strength returned a little more. He began keeping a journal again. One entry read, "They remember, they still believe, and one woman is leading them all." Then came the tipping point. A junior executive, young, bold, and tired of Desmond's tyranny-leaked confidential documents. They revealed falsified records, forged signatures, and a web of corruption that propped Desmond up after Ikenna's disappearance. The leak went viral overnight. News outlets picked it up. Former employees shared their stories. Investors panicked. Desmond held an emergency press conference to control the damage. But on the day of the conference, something unexpected happened. As Desmond stood at the podium, cameras flashing and microphones pointed, a hush fell over the crowd, because from the back of the room, escorted by a growing wave of staff in uniform and plain clothes alike, Ikenna walked in, clean, tall, calm, alive. Beside him, holding his hand firmly, was Adana. Asterisk, asterisk, the room fell silent as Ikenna's presence filled the space. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing the moment that had seemed impossible for years. Fallen CEO had returned. Adana stood beside him, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with fierce pride. The woman who had once swept floors now stood as the voice of a revolution. Desmond's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. The tide had turned. Ikenna stepped forward, his voice steady and commanding. For too long, corruption and betrayal have ruled this tower, but today, justice begins. He unveiled the evidence the junior executive had leaked proof of Desmond's schemes and manipulation. Employees nodded, whispers growing louder into cheers. Desmond tried to fight back, but the board had already convened and voted to remove him. Security escorted him out, his empire crumbling like dust. With Ikenna's return, hope blossomed anew. He promised reforms, fairness, and transparency. But most importantly, he recognized the unseen workers, the cleaners, the guards, the kitchen staff as the true heart of the company. Adana's eyes filled with tears as he spoke her name during his speech, calling her his beacon of light during the darkest days. Together, they rebuilt the company and, more importantly, each other. Love, born in the shadows, had found its place in the light. **** Months passed, and the city watched the remarkable transformation of both Ikenna and Zenith Tower. But the greatest change was the one no one saw: the quiet strength between Ikenna and Adana. Though Ikenna had reclaimed his throne, he wanted to be sure their love was genuine, not swayed by wealth or power. One evening, he invited Adana to his office. The room was softly lit, adorned not with trophies, but with photos of everyday workers, proof of the community he cherished. "I need to ask you something," he said gently. "If I were just a homeless man, would you still have stayed? Would you still have loved me?" Adana smiled warmly. "I loved the man beneath the rags, not the suits or the titles. You never needed to prove anything to me." He took her hands in his. "You are my true treasure. Together, we'll build not just a company, but a legacy of kindness and courage." As they looked out over the city lights, two hearts once broken were now whole, reminding everyone that true love sees beyond appearances, and that sometimes the greatest empires are built on the foundation of compassion. Thank you for joining this journey of love, resilience, and hope. Remember, no matter your station in life, kindness can change the world one heart at a time. If you watched till the end, please comment "end" so that we could understand you were with us till the end. As well as, please let us know where are you watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring African folktales that touch the soul. ****.